I'm Dr. Sri. I'm a board certified family medicine and sports medicine doctor. I also have a background in exercise physiology. In this video, we're going to discuss how calories are burned during exercise. So without further ado, let's get started. So this morning, I ran on a treadmill for 15 minutes and I burnt approximately 250 calories. How did my body do that? To understand this, we first need to clarify what a calorie really is. So a calorie is essentially a unit of energy employed by our bodies to power every single action, ranging from the automatic process like breathing, and then thinking to more conscious efforts such as walking and exercising. Think of it as the gasoline for your car. Without calories, just as the car won't run, our bodies can't operate or keep us active throughout the day. So to burn calories during exercise, our body needs to have calories stored. Our body consists of various tissues that store energy. The food that we eat is converted and stored in our body in different forms, such as muscle tissue that can provide us calories, fat tissue that can also supply calories, and the carbohydrate stores, which is called as the glycogen. So when I'm running on the treadmill, my body requires energy for my heart to pump faster, my lungs to increase their capacity, and my muscles to undergo numerous contractions and relaxations to maintain my pace. So the cornerstone of a body's energy production is through ATP. So ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. So basically, ATP is hydrolyzed to ADP and phosphate, and during this process, we get energy. So the phosphate is stored in the muscle, and the phosphate attaches to the ADP again, and thereby they replenish the ATP. So think about more like the calories that act as fuel helps to replenish ATP, and then we hydrolyze ATP to produce more energy, and that energy is what we use during exercise. So we always have some amount of stored ATP in our muscles. So let us say if I'm going to encounter a tiger here, the moment I see a tiger, I have to take action. Our body should not be creating ATP at that time. So we should always have somewhat of stored ATP so that we can take quick action. So the ATP is hydrolyzed to ADP, and then it provides us energy, and thereby we are able to run. But that's not going to last for more than 5 to 10 seconds or so. It's going to quickly deplete the ATP stores in our muscle. So then we have another system called as the phosphocreatine system. So basically what this does is that, so it provides a phosphate group to the ADP, the byproduct of ATP, and thereby the ADP starts to replenish the ATP. And this way we can get energy for around like 10 to 20 seconds or so. When you look at this pathway, the phosphocreatine pathway, this is what athletes who do like 100-meter sprints or javelin throws, this is the pathway that they primarily use when they are doing the athletic activities. So however, when I was running on the treadmill, I was not trying to stop my run after 20 seconds or so. So once I'm kind of like crossing that 20-second limit, I need more energy. So that's where our body starts to use glucose as fuel. So remember, let's go to the whiteboard back here. So I'm running on the treadmill. So the first I'm getting my ATP stored, and then we use the phosphocreatine pathway, and that helped me for almost like 20 seconds or so. And now I start to use glucose. So the glucose can come directly from the blood. So let's say if I just had maybe like a oats or something like that, that would have created some glucose in my blood. There's also storage houses of glucose, and we call this as the liver glycogen. So the liver glycogen, and then we have the muscle glycogen. So all these things are going to help me supply the energy to help with the run. So the good thing is that when I'm running, I'm actually using up the muscle glycogen in the working muscle. So my quad muscle, my hip muscles have stored glycogen. I'm using up the stored glycogen. But during this time, I use up this glucose stores and the glycogen stores without the oxygen on board, because my body is still not ready yet to consume more oxygen at this time, because we are at 20 to 60 second mark. My heart has not been pumping fast. My lungs has not been working fast. So it takes time. So during this time, we go through a system called as the anaerobic glycolysis. So basically without using oxygen, and the byproduct is going to be lactate. So let us say if you go for a 60-second run, and the burn and the fatigue that you get is basically comes from the buildup of the lactic acid. So this anaerobic glycolysis, even though it provides a quick energy boost, they cannot be sustained for long periods of time. So this is the energy athletes who play basketball, soccer, they use this energy. And with training, they can improve the efficiency at clearing the lactate, thereby enhancing their performance. So even though I'm using anaerobic glycolysis during the early phase of my treadmill run, I'm not running too fast to cause more lactate, thereby resulting in fatigue. I'm probably producing a little bit of lactate, but at the same time, I'm also using up my lactate for energy, so there's a good lactate clearance going on. And thereby, as I keep up with the run, I've already used up my ATP stores in the muscle. I've used up my phosphocreatine system. Now that I'm using the anaerobic glycolysis. So during this time, as I continue with the running, I'm able to start to get more oxygen, and thereby I'm able to activate more efficient fuel systems. So basically around the 2 to 3 minute mark, there is a noticeable increase in heart rate and stroke volume, basically the amount of blood injected in a single heartbeat, as well as in tidal volume, the volume of air entering the lungs per minute. So this increase in oxygen intake and blood flow enables my body to transition to more efficient fuel systems for sustained energy during the exercise. So now I'm consuming more oxygen in my muscles. I'm able to activate the more efficient fuel system. So let's go back to the whiteboard here. So we have two fuels that could sustain us for long periods of time. So one is the same, it's the same fuel that we use for anaerobic glycolysis, so basically the glycogen. So the glycogen is coming from two sources, one coming from the muscle and the other coming from the liver. So the glycogen, they can work without oxygen, and they also produce more energy when we have more oxygen. The carbohydrates are the more efficient fuel. What that means is that, so for the amount of oxygen consumed, it produces more energy. Whereas fat, they produce more energy per gram of fat that we consume or that we burn, but still, when you look at from an oxygen efficiency, carbohydrates are the preferred fuel. So what that means is that, let us say, if I start to increase my intensity of exercise, my body will start to prefer carbohydrates, or basically the stored glycogen and glucose as fuel compared to fat. But anyway, that's one that's one energy system, the glycogen, and the other one is coming from fat. So the fat basically has to get converted into fatty acids and then basically glycerol. So this glycerol can be used up again as it'll go into a process called as a gluconeogenesis, where it actually can produce glucose, and thereby entering into the glucose system. And then the fatty acids, they actually cannot be converted into glucose. They enter into another pathway called as a beta oxidation, and then they start to produce more energy. So body does not burn glycogen first and then burn fats again. So we are kind of burning a mix of glycogen and fat at all times. So for example, let us say I was doing a 50-minute run. So 50-minute run was kind of a little bit of a vigorous, intense exercise. So I probably would have been burning a mix of glycogen and a mix of fat. Or let us say there's also a chance that I would have been burning more fat and less glycogen. Again, it all depends on our training and how our body has accustomed to our training as well. So, but let us say if someone is doing a long distance running. In that case, they are probably trying to keep the glycogen and then burn more fat. But again, in 15 minutes of exercise, I'm not going to burn, or I'm not going to deplete all my glycogen. It might take hours to deplete all the glycogen, but sometimes it happens. So for example, when someone is doing a long distance running, they might completely deplete their glycogen, and that's when they'll start to notice fatigue as well. But let us say, for example, when I was doing a 50-minute run, and the last few minutes of run, I want to increase the intensity, I want to sprint. So during this time, the energy shift will become more towards carbohydrates. We talked about how carbohydrates is a more efficient fuel. But even during that time, so when I'm starting to sprint, again, I need more oxygen. And again, if I'm not able to consume more oxygen, during this time, part of the energy is going to come from aerobic glycolysis, so basically using oxygen, and part of them is going to come with anaerobic glycolysis. And let us say I start to produce more lactate, and that lactate is going to cause more fatigue, and thereby I'm just going to be waiting when my workout is going to be done. So number of calories that is displayed on the treadmill while we exercise is based on this assumption that how many extra oxygen that we are consuming during exercise. So during rest, we consume almost 3 mLs per kg per minute. So during exercise, so depending on the intensity of the exercise, we're going to consume anywhere between maybe 30 ml per minute, 30 ml per kg per minute oxygen. So that would quantify as based on the assumption formula, it'll tell us how many calories that we consume. Sometimes you'll see in your treadmill that you'll see as MET, metabolic equivalent. So basically 1 MET is the resting energy, that is 3 ml per kg per minute. So let us say if it shows 10 METs, it means that I'm doing an activity that is 10 times the amount of energy that I consume, the amount of energy that I spend during the rest. So during that 50-minute run, I burned almost like 250 calories. Now the question is that, do I burn more calories after exercise? And the answer is yes. And we call this excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, also called as the EPOC. So when I was running on the treadmill, it was a continuous steady-state run for 15 minutes. There wasn't much stress on the body, and my body would have taken almost like 2 to 3 minutes to get efficient fuel system activated by making sure that the oxygen delivery is steady. So during the initial stages, there was an oxygen deficit, and my body was compensating with the stored ATP and anaerobic glycolysis. And there was slight stress to the body. To recover from that, my body will need energy, and thereby I'll burn slightly more calories after I finish exercising. But let us say I'm doing high-intensity interval training, where I'm sprinting for 45 seconds, followed by running for 90 seconds, and I keep repeating this. During this, my body will never have time to stay in the efficient fuel system. My energy will mostly come from stored energy and the anaerobic glycolysis pathway, and additionally I also produce more heat, my stress hormones increase. All these factors has to normalize after I finish exercising, and this recovery takes time and energy, and thereby I burn more calories after high-intensity interval training. However, it's also important to make sure that we don't exaggerate the excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. So let's go to the whiteboard here. So let us say if I'm doing a steady-state cardio, again a steady-state cardio is where I am just kind of like running for 30 minutes or so, and let's say I'm burning almost like 500 calories after 30 minutes. So in that 500 calories, I'm going to produce I'm going to burn extra calories, almost like 7% of the calories that I burned during exercise. So that's going to be almost like 35 calories. So I burnt a total of 35 calories. But let's say if someone comes and tells me like, you know what, you burn more energy after you finished exercising with high-intensity interval training. So let us say I'm going to do high-intensity interval training, but I'm going to do like sprinting for like 30 seconds, and then after that I take like a 1 minute break and then I sprint. So during this time, let us say I burn almost like 120 calories or so, because high-intensity training produces a lot of fatigue. It's very hard to keep up for long periods of time like steady-state cardio is. So let's say you burn 120 calories during high-intensity interval training, and let us assuming that the EPOC, the excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, is almost like 14% or so, like twice the amount that I achieved during steady-state cardio. Then I'm looking at somewhere between like extra 30 calories or so. So when you look here on both, when you compare both steady state and high intensity, yes, when you compare to the amount of calories spent, you burn more calories after exercising, but still the amount of calories that you spend during exercise also matters. But again, high intensity interval training has other enormous benefits. Like one, you're training that pathway, you're training that anaerobic glycolysis pathway, you're also increasing the stroke volume of the heart. So you get a lot of other advantages. But I would not encourage someone to do high-intensity interval training just with a goal of spending more calories. A person might spend more calories by doing a more steady-state cardio rather than by just doing high-intensity training alone. So now that you've understood how calories are burned during exercise, it's important to make sure that we just don't learn, we just have to apply it. And not apply it, one has to start exercising regularly. And if you're someone who are completely new to exercising and you're having trouble with starting to exercise regularly, then check out this video here and I'll tell you how to get started with exercising. If you're someone who knows how to exercising, you know what to do, but still having trouble maintaining a consistent habit of exercising regularly, then check out this video here. And I'll see you in my next video. Until then, goodbye.